supply chainers, wherever you are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee with Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. She's not here today. She's off in Vegas with, it seems like every single person I know in supply chain. I'm not sure how I kind of missed that trip, but here I am in what's kind of sunny in Toronto today. My name is Audrey Ross. You've probably seen me as a guest on the show before. I'm the Import and Export Compliance Manager at Orchard Custom Beauty. We specialize in beauty tools, bath accessories, and cosmetics. We're award-winning. We just picked up another award earlier this week at the Paris Packaging Show. So we do that kind of, componentry, cosmetics, fill, that kind of thing. And I get to move it all over the world. So today on the show, I'm really excited to have our guest, Kellie Kemock, and you'll learn a little bit more about her in a few minutes, but we'll go over some of the things that are happening on Let's Talk Supply Chain. So we're going to start with our episode of the week. So we're looking at, this is a re-airing of a LogTech Live episode. It's episode number 320 for those of you who follow that way. And so in the episode, Eric Johnson, who hosts LogTech, is joined by special guest Anthony Miller. So he's a specialist in SaaS, tech, logistics, supply chain consultant. And they were sort of going through the hottest news from the biggest brands. And there was some really big news in that episode around a C.H. Robinson shift, some details at CargoWise. So sort of all of the hot brands that are working through the market and the kind of hot topics. So that's a great episode to catch with them. And I'm a big fan of the LogTech show, and of course Eric's letter every week. And so that's a good one. The upcoming events, of course, Manifest is today through February 2nd. So that's where Sarah is right now. Manifest is the future of logistics. So that's a great conference that we have, like I said, a lot of my friends are attending. We've got TPM 23 and TPM Tech coming up. So TPM Tech is the first piece from February, it's sort of February 24th and 25th. And then we've got the TPM, which is the Trans-Pacific Maritime Conference from February 26th to March 1st. So I'll be there in Long Beach. Hopefully I'll see you there. Kellie's going to come with me as well. So I'm starting to see the sort of, it's, about a month away or 3 weeks out. And it's like, who's going? And so it's really a great conference. There's lots of great content in the sessions to look forward to. I was sort of looking yesterday at the agenda to try and be like, okay, how am I going to follow this? And of course there is, there's 1 or 2 time slots where it's like, but this is happening at the exact same time as this one. And, the panic, like, how do I choose? So, that's a good lineup. So the other thing we have to talk about before we bring up Kellie is we'll do the follower of the month. So the follower of the month here at Let's Talk Supply Chain is the person who obviously is following the LinkedIn page. There's also, you've got YouTube, Twitter, Instagram as well. And they're the person who's in following and engaging, right? So taking part in those polls, dropping some comments, giving your insights on our thoughts in supply chain articles, and what's happening in the market. So today we'd like to congratulate Angela Torres Zavala. So congratulations to you. So you're the winner this month. And of course, you'll get to enjoy some Let's Talk Supply Chain merchandise. So that'll be sent to you. Congratulations. All right, so let's bring up Kellie to the stage.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. All right, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are right now?
Excellent. Yes, I'm in sunny but cold Chicago. My name is Kellie Kemock, as you've said. I am a manager at Ernst & Young, and I've been focusing on global trade for most of my career, inventory management in the aviation industry, and then trade compliance in pharmaceuticals. So yeah, I have an interest in this very topic and I love it. And I actually started a podcast because I love it so much called Women in Trade, where I interview women in the trade field just to kind of share that career path and how exciting the career path can be.
I love it. And so we're both trade experts. So we're members of the group called Trade Experts, which is supporting women in trade, but sort of it's journalists, it's economists. I'm like halfway through this coffee. Trade policy. So it's sort of there's obviously a few different women's organizations out there, and what I like about it is one, I mean, Hannah and sort of you and the core crew who sort of got it started are so dynamic and so supportive to us who are in the industry. What's something you love about it?
Trade Experts is amazing. And like you said, it's such a diverse group of people. I love that I can talk with people in the government sector or, like you said, economists, because too often we're in our own vacuum chamber, right, of just people that we do the same thing as. But learning how free trade agreements are negotiated by people who've been in the room that have negotiated trade agreements. It was so exciting. But I also do the Trade Experts podcast, so I have learned so much from all of the guests, and that's really why I love trade and the Trade Experts in general, is because I learned so much.
Yeah, it's such a great group. And so then the other highlight is so TPM Tech. You and I are both going to be going, and we're on a panel together called. I just lost the name, Empowering the Future of Trade. So we're going to be joined by Amy Morgan at Altana, who a lot of people on this space know, and also Peter Perenabo from S&P Global. So what's the sort of highlight so far from that chat that people can watch for?
Just really exciting talk about the future of technology in trade, and not just in trade compliance, but in trade from beginning to end. Again, I'm a lawyer, I'm a consultant, I'm not a technology person, but I am super excited about all the technology that we can use. Like, I feel like this, automation that we use on a day-to-day basis at EY is super, super helpful. And I really like to get the word out about how helpful it can be for trade compliance programs.
Yeah, I love it. So let's do a little bit of a market insight, a little bit about your expertise and what's a hot topic for you right now or for your clients.
Yeah, hot topic or pain point would be, complying with these with sanctions to Russia. I mean, the conflict is still happening, and we have clients that are still, wanting or needing to, have Russia as a destination for some of their products. And so just learning about the restrictions and learning about the exceptions to those restrictions, getting those products into Russia, what can go, what can't go. It's definitely something, that has changed the landscape a lot. I'm used to back in the day when export controls was based off of the export control number, hence the name ECCN. However, now there are restrictions on export control based off of the HS code, which is a little bit of a switch and something that has been hard to implement.
Yeah, that makes that like an added layer of complication to an already very it's some of these don't seem that straightforward because they're really trying to tack into certain industries and kind of have an impact in a certain way. And so then it just makes it so hard for your customers, I imagine.
Yeah, and it's actually like a comment on automation as well, because you can be all prepared with automation to screen on the ECCN number, but you need to have your automation software be able to pivot and screen on that HS code as well.
Yeah. Always keeping it easy for us out here.
Right. That's what makes it so interesting.
Right. That's where the problem solving comes in. That's where the technology inventiveness comes in. Oh my goodness, so much fun. Let's have a look. We're gonna pivot ourselves. So we'll have a look at the weekly poll that Let's Talk did this week. So every Wednesday there's a poll that goes up. Sometimes it's really fun and sort of just kind of just a kind of a mind twister. And sometimes it's, sort of related to the industry. So it's always a kind of an interesting time. So this week, the poll is, of course, I've lost it. How would you maintain your work-life balance? And the poll questions go more social activities, be offline when we're not at work, take time off, do a vacation, or other, and drop a comment below. So it's well received at 600 and something votes. So do you want a minute to think about it, and I'll go through some of the comments?
Yeah, I probably am not the person to be giving advice on work-life balance. I am not very good at it. But my vote was, be offline when you're not at work. If you're not going to be at work, then you better be enjoying your time. But when you're at work, you do your job and you're good at it, right? But I have to be better about this as well. But that was my vote.
Yeah.
I
think it's the same thing. I really enjoy my work. So then you start to have that blend of oh, it's 6 o'clock and I'm still thinking about work, or I'm looking at articles at night because they're related to my work, or I'm, so yeah, but I do think I agree with you. I think it's that taking that some detachment and having this sometime when it's okay, if I'm with my friends, if I'm with my goddaughter, if I'm, reading, it's the phone is away, the work is off, and get some separation from it, even though we love it.
Yes, I know. What were some of the comments about the other one?
I think people had our friend CM Lewis said more socializing and dropped a video about loving the nightlife. So that's a good one. A couple of people, Lacey Lester said having boundaries and being honest with yourself. And I think I would agree with that, where it's if I'm going to work, accept and choose that I'm putting in some work because I enjoy it, or because I have something that I really want to get done, or a goal that I want to meet. But then also, have those boundaries so that I can have the separation. And then Juliet Karanha said self-awareness and being intentional, which I think kind of lines up with our voting process here too.
Yeah.
So that's a fun one. Yeah, we'll kind of see throughout the next couple of days before the next poll goes up what everybody else thinks.
Excellent.
All right. So let's dive into, we've got a couple of hot articles today. So we're going to start, we've been talking a little bit, Sarah and I have talked before about reverse supply chains. Obviously it's a big piece of making our very linear supply chains into circular. And so we've been highlighting some articles on that on previous episodes, but today we're looking at one that comes in, and it's reverse supply chains and sustainability, and it's making the case for the retail returns. So it's by Neil Rodden, and it's sort of talking about the amount of waste involved, and he drops some really big facts. And also it's, reverse logistics is kind of considered the backward movement of goods through the supply chain. And today is apparently National Backwards Day. So we're right on theme here. But if we think about returns, it's kind of, the first stat he gives is a $1.7 trillion in 2022 and employing over 430 million people worldwide. And then he goes into some of the details around which industries are most affected by returns. So we can see that, clothing, fashion, textile production, he's dropping a McKinsey report that while people are bought 60% more garments, sort of into the mid 2014, 2015 than they did in 2000, they only kept clothes for half as long. So I was trying to think to my wardrobe, okay, what have I bought for the last 10 years, and have I kept it, or has it gone, have I donated it, or gotten rid of it? And then he has a look at, last year, so in 2022, 12.2% of apparel products were returned. And I think, as we've gone through the pandemic, we saw such an increase in e-commerce and people buying things at home because we couldn't go and try things on. But I think clothes, it's really, it's really hard to judge from the picture and the size how that's going to work.
Yeah.
So it tends to be sort of the top return product, and then second to auto parts, which are at a 19% return rate. So, it ends up being almost 11 million tons of textile waste. What are some thoughts you had in looking at this article?
Yeah, I mean, the sustainable reverse supply chain in the textile industry is super interesting to me because I feel like that is one of the industries where the circular economy is very like I can picture how that circular economy would work, right?
Yeah.
You have fabric that can be returned and you can make new things with fabric. And so it's super, super interesting to read about that particular industry. The industry I used to work in aviation has this reverse supply chain as well. So if you think about maintenance on an aircraft, parts come off of an airplane and then they refurbish those parts and then they go back on an airplane. And so for like multiple times, these parts can be reused. And so it's very circular in the maintenance, I guess, area of aviation. And I used to work for a company that would essentially buy old planes and then piece them out and repair and do maintenance and sell the maintenance parts that way. So kind of like a chop shop for airplanes. Is very, very interesting. That was actually it was my first job out of college, and I did I was my internship, and I convinced them by finding $1 million worth of lost revenue because their reverse supply chain was not working efficiently. And then when I presented that to the general manager, they told me to come back on Monday. And I got a job that way because of reverse supply chain, because I was identifying that their reverse supply chain was not efficient. They had this program where they would give their clients a working product, and the client was supposed to give them their core, their non-working product back. And then they would give them like a discount or whatever. And then they were supposed to refurbish that and then resell it. But that lag, they were missing out on so much revenue because they weren't enforcing the return as quickly as it needed to be. So if they could just tighten that window, they were missing out on $1 million.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
And that's where it is.
It's textiles too.
Yeah, and it's the gap, right? And they have a quote here from Wendy Cathcart, who's the co-founder of a virtual try-on company called CD Look. And she's suggesting like the more we return, the more there is a possibility that the clothing's not getting back on the shelves. And if it doesn't get to maybe a discounter or someone else, it's just going to landfill. So I think we can all tell that fashion has some gaps here that they haven't been able to kind of deal with. But it's almost, amazing the sheer amount of stuff that's, I think, produced. And I've suggested on previous, I get really passionate about fashion, but I've suggested like companies need to do more pre-orders. Like we see some great brands. There's a great brand here in Canada that makes coats, shearling coats, which, they're more expensive, obviously, but they pre-order them. So they gather the number of people, the size of the coat. They have a really good, really clear measurements. Everything's really defined. They'll help you with measurements. So that you know what size you're getting, and then they order, once they have a certain amount of orders, they order and cut the fabric so that they're not wasting it, and then they take the scrap, and now they've done a home line, like a home decor line of cushions and blankets with all of the fabric scraps that they're not using. So it's like, but it helps having those pre-orders, whereas every other retailer is just mass. Like they make a decision somewhere at the top, and that's what you're going to wear, and then it turns out it's not what we're going to wear, so we don't buy it, or we return it. So
the other interesting piece about that article was just the fact that there was no return refunds. Like they have established that it's actually fine if they never receive the product back, and they'll still provide the refund of the good, which is just a highlighting of how difficult that reverse logistics can be for companies, and that they would rather just let you keep it but still give you your money back.
Yeah, I think because that was Amazon, I think. But I think because they have so many different products, like it would just like if they just did one thing or 15 SKUs, then maybe they could manage it. But because they do like a million things, and they have resellers and sellers, and it's just bizarrely complicated. Yeah. The other piece I like from this article is that he kind of outlines the reverse supply chain platforms sort of perform the 5 processes. So he goes to specifically to like it's product acquisition, where you're getting it back. It's the reverse. It's the transporting it back to a facility. It's inspection. and assessment. It's remanufacturing or refurbishing, like you talked about. And then it's the marketing of creating the secondary markets and figuring out, okay, if I have refurbished it, it sounds like an airline. It's like, okay, well, then it can go back to here. If I've refurbished it in clothing, where, what else can it go to? So, but I think this is something that consumers are really paying attention to.
Yeah. Well, and there's also this level of complexity where products cross borders, because if you might have this customs piece where customs does have things like a 9801 U.S. goods return. If you have exported something, you can return it, and there's a function to get your money back on the duties that you paid to import if you re-export it. And then also duty drawback in case it's something that you don't use and you need to return it. You can get that duty back. There's a way to refund that duty, but you can imagine how much paperwork and compliance goes into implementing those programs and using those programs.
Yeah, you got to have someone like me in house or someone like you on your side, because it's quite a bit of paperwork to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look to our next one, which ties into your airline background and also your Chicago location. So the next article is called "The Race to Scale Sustainable Airline Fuel," which I learned SAF, Sustainable Airline Fuel, is my new acronym of the week.
Yeah.
So this article looks at how the prices, of course, are very expensive because it's a very limited production capacity right now. And so we've got companies like Neste, who's a producer, Airbus, who is an airliner producer, are trying to join forces to sort of push the use of sustainable aviation fuel. But they're also really, the list of companies in the article, or the summary, is that they're also trying to push the administration. This is talking about a U.S. administration and U.S. companies, but to kind of make the investments. So maybe to make that shift over. What do you think?
Yeah, super interesting about the aviation fuel and trying to make it more sustainable. Sometimes they add in oil from vegetables, like vegetable oils or other foodstuffs, they say. But then sometimes they use like carbon and hydrogen to create that base fuel and add it, which is super interesting. And my background with this topic is diesel. Did you know that diesel engines can run on peanut oil alone?
Oh.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where this biofuel has come from. A diesel engine, it was originally designed, if you look it up, is originally designed to run on peanut oil, but actually gasoline was more plentiful at the time. So they decided to use gasoline as the combustible material to run the diesel engine. Right. Now, obviously, diesel piston engines are way different than turbine aviation engine, so that the fuel is different, but the idea is the same, is that you try to use something that is not a gasoline based fuel, or something that's more sustainable, to the point of this article. And they're just kind of adding these sustainable materials to the fuel that they currently use to kind of add the percentage of what is sustainable. But it's interesting that, diesel engines today could run on 100% vegetable oil. My dad and my brother fly airplanes, but then they also have diesel trucks that they have worked on to use this vegetable oil, reuse vegetable oil. You fry fish in it.
It's
and then fresh. You put it in your truck. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's very circular, because it's not like the fresh, like unused. It's I love it. And I think this goes into some of that, like the biofuels that they're using. It makes it, obviously a greener solution, but there's such a drive for it. Because here they are going over with DB Schenker was saying they've purchased more than 11,000 tons just in 2022. They're anticipating purchasing more. So that's why it's sort of the drive is on to get more capacity. And so they announced a global CO2 neutral flight offer. So shippers like myself with BCO can choose SAF to power their flights on any global route. It's probably a little bit more expensive, but it seems like healthcare, pharma, high fashion, and consumer electronics brands are kind of choosing that. But you can tell that it's like that pushes from our customers. We get asked that, what's the ship mode? Is there a more sustainable option? And it's less the conversation of what's the cheapest option, what's the fastest option. Now it's like, how can we build this into our planning to have that? Because everyone has made these carbon commitments. So if it, like it's 2023, and if you hit that 2025 commitment, like you've got to start to get serious. So yeah.
The demand is there. It seems like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the article is pointing out that the supply is what is lacking. And right, I think you had mentioned they're asking for maybe some subsidies or like help to make that production a little easier to start up and to manage.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's always the case, right? In a sort of new industry or developing, it's like they're sort of looking for those subsidies. So we'll see how that goes. It looks like there's a Chicago or an Illinois-based
I saw it. I wanted to see where it was. It would be great to learn more.
Yeah, and so their capacity is increasing. There's also one opening up in Georgia. So I'm hoping our friend Kathy Robertson, she's a super air cargo and airplane. She's a fan, so maybe she'll dive into this topic too.
Very cool.
In her next articles. So last, I want to leave a few minutes for, sort of our jam, which is the digital trade. So our last article is Singapore and South Korea sign a digital trade agreement. And so this article goes into just some of the highlights. It's with the ASEAN briefing website here. So Singapore signed the trade agreement in November 2022. So it's called the KSDPA, which is the Korea-Singapore Digital Partnership Agreement. And of course, it's the fourth that Singapore has signed because they're really on top of this stuff. So they're trying to encourage more seamless cross-border data flows and then building that trustworthy digital environment. The first one that they signed was with New Zealand and Chile, which I think is kind of an interesting. Singapore, New Zealand, and Chile is sort of geographically interesting. But yeah, this article goes into some of the key features of that. What's the standout for you? Because this is definitely your jam.
Absolutely. Trade in general. And it just seems like this area of the world is so progressive, where trade can be very archaic and slow moving and hard to update to the new and upcoming technology. I mean, you can see these countries are on top of it. They have addressed an issue, the fact that technology is growing, more and more, and they need to address it in policy, which is great. This doesn't really affect like my day-to-day work because where I work primarily is the movement of goods across borders. But digital trade is super interesting because there's evidence of things moving from physical goods now moving to digital trade. The very basic example is you used to buy a book, but now you just download it. You used to buy CDs or records or whatever, but now you just download them or stream them. So things are moving to digital. And what I think is super interesting, and I love to do more research when I have the time, is how 3D printing would change the movement of goods into the digital sphere. Because if you, instead of like sending a set of your table, if if you're missing an IKEA piece for your table to put together, they can just send you in theory, they could send you, to 3D print this plastic piece in your house, and they don't actually have to mail it. There's no supply chain, there's no movement, there's no physical good moving across borders. So this space, I'm keeping my eye on it because it doesn't affect me right now in my job, but it will affect all of us, as technology increases.
Well, I think these kinds of agreements, like it's Singapore having the agreement with New Zealand and Chile, having this agreement with South Korea, building these agreements, it does sort of set at least a bit of a framework for other countries that are trying to get this rolling, because it really touches on things that are important to small businesses, right? Like e-payments and e-transfers, where, all of us used to do these letters of credit. They were very cumbersome and expensive, and you had to go through very legitimate established banks. And now we're seeing so much with these sort of private digital wallets or digital companies. So these e-payments, that'll have an effect on this surge, this sort of surge in the sort of crypto and currency pieces, the paperless trade, which sort of we got forced into by the pandemic. I've never not had to do like an original bill of lading. I hadn't seen an original bill of lading in like a year, and I had to deal with one the other day, and I was like, how do I do that? Like something I did like for 10 years, and I'm like, what is this? How do I deal with it? So I think those things are really interesting. We've only got about 30 seconds left. Any last thoughts on this?
No, a super interesting cross reference of topics that you didn't think could touch trade compliance, but they do. They have trade compliance crosses over a variety of different topics, which is what makes it so interesting.
Yeah. Kellie, thank you so much for joining me today. And it was great having you and having your insights and experience here. I'm so looking forward to meeting you in person in Long Beach. And to everyone who joined in, thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you. Yeah, Sunny for us from Toronto and Chicago.